Hey there, my name's Cole, aka Mr. Penning. I draw erotic art, and yeah, so that's me. In this video, I'm going to share some tips on drawing the torso. First, I'm going to cover some major landmarks and points on the body that I think are really helpful. From there, we'll go into how that applies to gesture and a line of action. I'll share what I call the guitar pick method, which I think is a really useful method for drawing the torso. I'll go over basic forms like cylinders and boxes and how to simplify the body using these forms. And then finally, we'll go into a little bit on basic anatomy and how I construct the body and go from there. Yeah. So a lot of people, when they start drawing, they may use this method to construct the torso. And the problem with this method is that this space in between is kind of hard to keep track of. It's kind of hard to keep consistent. So what I'd recommend instead, we're going to learn this. I call this the guitar pick method because quite obviously it looks like two guitar picks wedged together. First off, let's cover some major points on the body: the clavicle, the bottom of the sternum, the navel, and the pubis. So where the pelvis, the pubis, you got it. So keeping in mind these points, we can use this to track the line of action of our gesture. It's kind of like a connect the dots game. The key point of this guitar pick method is that we are using these points to connect our two major forms and keep them bound together, keep them intertwined essentially. So the top guitar pick is going to start at your shoulders. Its line is going to be the shoulders, and its point is going to be the belly button. The bottom guitar pick, its point is going to be the bottom of the sternum and the pubis. So with this, we're able to easily keep our points intact without having them float off into space or away from each other. When you're starting your gesture, I like to start with the line of action and then two exaggerated lines to define the tilt of the pelvis or the hips and the tilt of the shoulders. And from there, we can connect that, we can build out our guitar pick form. Another important thing to mention with gesture is the curvature of the spine. The body has a sort of asymmetry to it. It curves, the top part of the spine curves in, like around the neck. It curves out again around the rib cage. It curves in for the lower back and then kind of out. This creates a natural tilt for the pelvis. So both the two major forms kind of tilt away from each other and create this kind of natural bend to the body. To quickly illustrate this point, I'll highlight the line of action, the torso guitar pick. I'll do them out here. And so this will serve as a starting point or a bounding box for when we start adding more anatomical forms. So from here, we'll start building out the forms of our body. And my favorite form to use is the box method. So I'd like to highlight what I think are the edges. I have no idea like how to say this. I am just so a box has freaking edges, it has like edges. And this top edge thing right here, that's gonna be like the clavicle. And then the back edge, that's gonna be the scapula. So like the scapula and the clavicle make these top edges of the box. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's like you know, the scapula is like a bone in the back, right? And then the clavicle like connects, it's the collarbone. That's what it is for the layman's terms. And so these are a really easy landmark to think about, like that top edge of the box. You feel me? Okay, so the second part This is so bad. So, okay. The sternum. The sternum is a really nice landmark because it is it helps us define the orientation of our box. I look for the sternum to define the orientation almost every time I'm drawing a gesture. You can see that this plane is pointing outwards. And this is going to be important when comparing the two directions that these forms are facing. So this isn't a good example, but later I'll show a twisting example where the sternum will be a better landmark to pay attention to. So hips and rib cage. So you see this section of the box right here? This is like the side of the box. Well, really helpful landmark is the edge of the rib cage, because the rib cage, you know, like it looks like this, kind of has this odd shape to it, and I'll go over that in a second. Well, this line right here is a very natural edge that aligns with the pelvis right here, the iliac crest, I believe it's called, or the crest of something. Crest of the covenant. Anyway, okay, and last but not least, the perineum. If you don't know what a perineum is, I had to look this up. Don't Google it. It's fine. It's this part. It's the gooch. As an erotic artist, you will be far more concerned with the bottom of the box than any normal artist. So that's why I bring this up. But the nice thing is that the perineum is a fantastic landmark for the bottom of the box. If you can find that section, it's really easy to draw the body in different angles or drawing the bottom of the body. I'm going to give some examples of mapping a box to these forms. I'm using, landmarks like the spine, the underwear. If your model is wearing underwear, is a really fantastic landmark to pay attention to, because that will help us identify the edge of that hip. It can be really hard to draw the boxes in different orientations. So I can't recommend enough just practicing twisting, tilting, bending boxes. It will really help. If you can find the form, if you can map the form to these individual parts, you can then just connect their edges together, right? So if I have to draw a torso twisting, it can be kind of tricky to visualize all this stuff moving all at once. So let's break it down. We can think about the top half. We can think about the direction the sternum is facing. And maybe, let's say our torso is twisting a little bit. So that means that the front orientation of the hips may be facing forward a bit. I'm not sure how realistic this pose is, but let's call it an exaggerated example. So now that I've drawn these two forms, they're in slightly different orientation. Now I can connect them, and we have a bit of a twisting torso here. I'm drawing over these models to illustrate the point. I do think tracing can be a really helpful tool for practicing these things. I do a little bit of both. I'll trace, and then I'll try to draw what I've traced on my own. Yeah, solid. I mentioned the bottom of the box and how, as an erotic illustrator, you'll pay more attention to that than most normal people. Paying attention to the bottom of the box is one of the most essential things for drawing any spread legs pose or booty focused pose or anything like that. It's like, look at this. You have just such a natural way of drawing a natural plane change of drawing the body, and see how it just kind of just drops off here. Boop, boop, boop. A really nice thing about visualizing the box in these kinds of poses is that it's really easy to draw the legs almost like you're extruding a secondary box right from the legs, or right from the the torso, you know, that the thing we're talking about. This pose right here is a really good example of those two differing orientations and how we can make use of that to twist the torso. And then if we were going to draw legs, we could then just add in more forms. Oh yeah, one other thing I was going to mention is cylinders. Frankly, I didn't have much to say on this part. Just like you can use a box, you can use a cylinder. I use the cylinder not as much, but it's helpful because the body isn't entirely blocky. It's not, these edges aren't clearly defined. We can use parts as landmarks to help us think of the body as a box, but it's also round. So thinking in terms of a combination of the two is really helpful, where the sides of the body are going to be a little bit more cylindrical, and then the front of the body is going to be a little bit more boxy. It's sort of a box, sort of a cylinder. Some things to keep in mind. You know, a great way to practice this is simply just kind of rounding out your forms. So if you play around with boxes and then try to think, okay, what if there wasn't an edge here and we just add a curve instead? Think of this as a tool in your arsenal for when manipulating your forms. It's not always going to be applicable because the body is very complicated, but it's just something else to think about. Okay, so part 3. We've talked a little bit about gesture, keeping the body contained and consistent using landmarks and connecting them using the guitar pick method. We've talked about then adding form on top of that and using boxes and cylinders to add some depth and three-dimensionality to our body. So now I'm going to go over a little bit of basic anatomy and talk about the forms that make up the torso. So the rib cage is sort of like this half egg shape with an opening on the top. So when I start adding arms, I like to think of the spaces that the shoulder is going to start. So I'll often draw some kind of pivot point. A common one is balls. You can draw some balls on that, shoulder balls. And then I like to think of this shoulder pad method. So I kind of think of this as like a football player's shoulder pads. And so to talk about why that is, a little bit on anatomy, is that the pectoralis thing, it connects, this muscle actually connects to about halfway down the humerus, whatever, the arm bone. It connects just under where the deltoid connects. So we can make use of that by thinking of this as a rhythm. You can think of this rhythm on the back as well. So think of this as like some kind of drapery falling over the top of the body. So if we've already drawn our forms, you know, however you want to do it, whatever works for you, you've gotten to this part. Now I'm going to cut the rib cage just above the sternum. If I'm thinking about the rib cage and its bony landmarks, just above the sternum, I'm going to kind of cut the rib cage in half and draw a little line. Then I'll add my arm points, and from this section midway through the sternum, I'm going to kind of draw just like a little shoulder pad rhythm. And and that can lead up into our neck, and we're not talking about heads and faces today, so we can just leave this as a headless man. And then from there, you can kind of draw your arms. And we're not talking about arms today either. We're not talking about anything really. Here's just some examples, like even though much of the body isn't visible here, I still can think of a rhythm through the chest. I don't know why I picked that one, honestly. But here you can see the bottom of the pec and the breast kind of leads right into pointing at that section where the deltoid overlaps the arm and pectoralis. So because, like, think of it as like some kind of drapery, and I like to kind of add like this ellipse, like this 3D circle for the armpit, and from there I can extrude out the arm. So not only does the body include shoulders, but it also includes other things like abs and the oblique. So we're going to cover those a little bit right now. You can think of abs as sort of like a thick little mat that just sits right on top of the bony forms of the body. I'm thinking of it as a mat because it actually does have some depth. It protrudes out from the body a little bit. They connect to the bottom of the sternum and to top of the pubis, like the bony landmark of the pelvis. I'm going to go over just something I've noticed. So this is an incredibly subtle thing. Even though we're aware of the forms, we actually want to only hint at them just barely. If you exaggerate them too much, it depends on what you're going for, but it can look a little too muscular. It really depends on what you're going for. One thing I wanted to point out is that being aware of this form and how it protrudes out a little bit, we can think of that in our shading. Here, if we make her really tan, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. You see this, like how the shadow indicates a plane shift right here? Like look at this. There's the shadow right here, and then there's a light spot like right there. That's kind of like where the abs meets the oblique. And you can kind of just hint at it with like a small little dollop of shadow. Keeping this in mind, when I shade, I like to add like with a soft brush, and then because there's a plane shift right here, we can add a hard edge, and that indicates that there's a very subtle plane shift. If I hide my line work, I hope you can maybe see kind of what I'm talking about. For this section of the body, it's catching just a little bit of shadow and a little bit of light, and the way you make your edges can indicate that. See this little spot of light right here? Easy tummy right there. It's just, you just make a little shadow, and then you just carve a point out of it. Easy edges. Whoever said art was hard? So next is the oblique, and the oblique is a really nifty little muscle that sits right on top of the crest, the pelvic crest. So obliques are, they're much more apparent on men. They're very easy to spot. Can you spot the oblique? It's right there. It's right there. You can see it. It's right here. Men have very defined, curvy, nice, sexy obliques. Here it is. It's being pushed against the pelvis right here. You see that little line right there? That's being caused by the bone of the pelvis pushing against the external oblique. So a little bit more of a challenge. Can you spot the oblique now? I bet you can't, because women have shrimpy, female, squishy obliques. No, not really. Women have beautiful obliques. It's awesome. They're great. So anyway, the thing to keep in mind here is make the oblique incredibly subtle on women. It's almost not going to appear on the silhouette whatsoever, but it does appear a little bit in our shading. You can see here where the belly that subtle protrusion is casting a little bit of light onto that oblique. When I shade this on tummies, we can simply just kind of carve out these forms. We could establish our dominant value, maybe hint at a little bit of the rib cage right there and how that plane shift happens on the rib cage. And then we can add in that little bit of light, adding a little bit of light to showcase our forms a little bit. Sometimes the rib cage will actually catch a little bit of light here, a little highlight. These are just some things I like to pay attention to. I just think it's neat. Anyway. Here I'll provide a demo on how I like to draw and how I use these concepts. You'll see I tend to start with a line of action and gestural blocking in of my figure, and then I'll refine the shapes, adding in form and more three-dimensionality to my figure. That's basically the gist of it, and then just leveling up the drawing and improving things, tweaking things, and making it look better along the way. For practice, I recommend twisting and manipulating basic forms and boxes is a really great practice. Studying gesture and just practicing the human form. You can mix and match these approaches. You can think of them as tools in your tool belt, in your artistic arsenal, if you will. If you've watched this far, thank you. This is my first tutorial, my first time trying this, and I'm sure it was very rough. It was pretty fun to make, and I hope to get better at making these for you. If you have any ideas for things you'd like me to cover, or things you'd like me to talk about, or if you have your own tips and advice that you want to share in your comments, please do. I'd be very interested in hearing anyone else's experience and things that they'd recommend. So that's about it. Thank you, and peace out.